What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're here for Week 7 NFL picks and predictions. Last week we had a strong week going 10-3. We still have the two Monday night games to go tonight. I have the Bills and the Commanders winning the games tonight. But we are 60-30-1 on the season, which is about a 67% win rate on the season. And I like to compare that with the best pickers on ESPN Pigskin Pick'em app at 71-19 on the season, which is absolutely incredible. And then the two teams we have on bye this week are the Ravens and the Bills. So let's get started here with the Steelers at the Bengals. These Thursday night games have been interesting to pick. The Giants upset the Eagles last Thursday night. The Thursday night before that, the 49ers upset the Rams. But I don't expect another upset here. I think the Steelers take care of business. I was impressed with the Steelers' defense last week against the Browns. I thought that they could have had multiple interceptions in that game. I thought that Jalen Ramsey was really involved in that game, had 2 sacks in that game. And, what does Aaron Rodgers do? He exploits bad defenses. I think he does that in this game against the Bengals. Aaron Rodgers has been super efficient, getting the ball to 8 different receivers in the game last week for at least 10 yards or more. So I think that was a really impressive stat as well. Right now, though, 40% of people are going with the Bengals, which I understand. The Bengals signed Flacco at quarterback, and they've actually looked immediately better. I think that he has a lot of talent to throw to, like Higgins, Jamar Chase, Noah Fant. So he's actually got some legitimate receivers to throw to. But nonetheless, I still like the Steelers in this matchup. I think that it's going to be interesting after this matchup for the Steelers to see what team they really are, what they're really made of, because they're going to be facing the Packers, the Colts, the Chargers, coming up in this next stretch of games. But give me the Steelers to win that. Then we have the Rams at 4-2 at the Jaguars 4-2, an international London series here. And I'm really worried about Trevor Lawrence in this game. Lawrence was sacked 7 times last week against the Seattle Seahawks. And to me, the Rams front 7 is one of the better units in the NFL. I think he's going to get exposed. I don't think that Trevor Lawrence has been playing all that great of football this season. I think a lot of the Jaguars' success has come from their defense. So I think that this is going to become a more defense versus defensive battle. I think the first to 23, 24 points in this game wins the game. So I like the Rams here. I don't think the Rams are perfect, though, by any means. They've had their issues on special teams this season. They're struggling in the red zone, and they're likely missing Puka Nacua in this matchup. But to me, you just kind of have to give me the more experienced quarterback coaching duo, in these international game environments, and that to me is the Rams. So give me them. But I am going to watch out for the Jaguars. I'm not super confident in this pick because, like I said, the Jaguars defense has been playing really good this season. Then we go to the Dolphins at 1-5, at the Browns 1-5. I'm going to side with the minority here. 40% of people picking the Browns. To me, I think the Browns are just a little bit better. I think the Dolphins season kind of ended last week versus the Chargers at home. The Dolphins division is just too good right now with the Bills and the Patriots to kind of even compete. At least with the Browns, the Ravens and the Bengals are really struggling as well. And you're looking at the Browns, their next upcoming games, they have a pretty easy slate versus the Jets, Titans, Raiders, Bears, Bengals. So I can see some wins there for the Browns. I don't feel super comfortable taking the Browns here with Dylan Gabriel. But I think that, a big factor here is the Browns are going to be at home in this game, and this is going to be a rainy environment in Cleveland. So I think that the Miami Dolphins are going to struggle a little bit with that. And I just have not loved the way that Tua has been playing this season. I thought he didn't play all that great versus the Chargers last week, overthrew a lot of receivers, and he still got a lot of talent out there, even with Tyreek Hill, not out there. He's still got guys like Jalen Waddle, Darren Waller, Malik Washington. The next matchup here we have is the 4-2 Patriots at the 1-5 Titans. I think there's a possibility here for a coach firing rebound. That happened a lot last season, I remember, where, you fire your coach and then the next week you end up winning the game. I could really see that happening here at home for the Titans, but I'm just going to go with the Patriots. They've been playing really good football. They're in a good groove with Vrabel at coach. This is a homecoming game for Vrabel in Tennessee. But coming into this game, the Patriots are on a 3-game winning streak. Drake May is probably playing the best best football of his career up to this point. There's an interesting stat here that he's the only quarterback in the league right now with a passer rating of 100 plus in each of the last 5 games. Cam Ward, to me, he's on pace for 7 touchdowns this season, so that's not great whatsoever. Obviously, it's a lot to do with what's going on around him. But I just don't see the Titans winning this game. I think the Patriots have a lot more going on. One thing, though, I have to say about the Titans, I really do like Jeffrey Simmons. I think he's one of the more dominant interior defensive players in the league. So the Patriots do have to watch out for him. And like I said, I think that coach firing rebound is a real possibility. So I don't feel super comfortable about the Patriots here, but give me them to win it. Then we have the Raiders at 2-4, at the Chiefs 3-3. I think the Chiefs convincingly win this one in Arrowhead. They're getting healthier. They're getting Rashee Rice back from suspension now. I think this offense is looking a lot better than it did at the start of this season. And you're looking at the Raiders. They're not getting enough good quarterback play. Geno Smith's already thrown 10 interceptions in the first 6 games of the season. So there's no passing threat. The offensive line is not good. And because of that, the running game has struggled as well. And Brock Bowers is probably going to miss another game, and he's been a huge miss for you guys this season. And even though the Raiders, they beat the Titans last week, that wasn't a good enough performance, or didn't show me enough for me to expect them to beat the Chiefs this week. So then we move on to the Eagles at 4-2, at the Vikings 3-2. The Eagles find themselves in an interesting spot. They're on a 2-game losing streak. And they find themselves in a very tough away environment in Minnesota. I think this is a very tough game in Minnesota. I think the Eagles can be exploited too. I mean, the Eagles secondary isn't perfect. There's some holes there that I think that can be exploited with Justin Jefferson. But right now, Carson Wentz is coming into this game with a banged-up shoulder. If that wasn't the case, I may lean Vikings, but give me the Eagles to win this game. Another factor, though, the Vikings are coming off a bye. I don't think that's super significant, but, it could offer them some time to get a little bit healthier. So that's another advantage for the Vikings, but give me the Eagles there. Then we have the Panthers at 3-3, at the Jets 0-6. You never like picking Carolina on the road, but you don't like picking the Jets either. Justin Fields had 45 passing yards last week, was sacked 9 times versus Denver. The thing with the Panthers is you never know which team you're going to get, from a week-to-week basis, but it seems like they're relying more on the running backs and relying less on Bryce Young, which I think is a good thing. So give me the Panthers. They've continued to play well. I thought they played a complete game against the Cowboys last week in all 4 quarters of the game. So give me the Panthers to win that game to go to 4-3. Then you have the Giants at 2-4, at the Broncos 4-2. I love the Broncos here. I think the Broncos, they're on a 3-game winning streak here, and this defense, to me, specifically the defensive line, has also been a great unit in the NFL this season. I think that Jackson Dart is really going to struggle here because they've been super solid against mobile quarterbacks. And then you're talking about the home field advantage, the high altitude in Denver. I think that Jackson Dart is really going to struggle with that. We saw him struggle in his first road game in the NFL against New Orleans, where he threw 2 interceptions. So I really love, the Broncos and this Vance Joseph-led defense here. So give me them and Sean Payton to outcoach Dable in this game. Then we have the Colts at 5-1, at the Chargers 4-2. The Colts have been good, but defensively, I think they can give up a lot of yards to good quarterbacks. We've seen that with Bo Nix this season. We've seen that with Matthew Stafford. I think this is the best quarterback the Colts are going to have faced yet this season in Justin Herbert. And even though Justin Herbert doesn't have an offensive line right now, I still think he takes care of business in this game. The Chargers are 4-0 in the AFC this year, so that's something to consider as well. The one thing, though, for the Chargers is they really got to contain Jonathan Taylor, because they've done a pretty poor job of containing running backs this season. But I think the Chargers, they're going to get a little healthier in this game. I think Denzel Perryman is going to be back, Quentin Johnson, potentially even Joe Alt. So I think the Chargers have a good chance in this game. It's not going to be in Indianapolis, where the Colts have a really good home field advantage. I think it's more of a neutral field here in Los Angeles. Then we have the Packers at 3-1, at the Cardinals 2-4. Give me the Packers. I'm not super confident in this pick, but obviously I can't pick the Cardinals. But I think the Packers have a lot of weaknesses in the secondary. I think that Jordan Love hasn't been all that great. I think he throws at least one bad pick a game. I just don't know what I'm going to get from the Cardinals, though. They came out with Jacoby Brissett last week, and he actually looked pretty decent. Um, and I know the Arizona Cardinals are fighting for their season already at this point in the season, but I just like the Packers more, even away in Arizona. But I think that's really a toss-up game. Then you have the Commanders at 3-2, at the Cowboys 2-3-1. I'm actually going to take the Cowboys here. I think there's good value, with only 30% of people picking the Cowboys. I'm kind of waiting for the injury report on this game because I want to see if CD Lamb is going to be back for this game. Same with Terry McLaurin for the Commanders. So I think there's some things to look at there. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just like Dallas here. I think they play a lot better at home. I picked them last week on the road. I was pretty skeptical about doing that versus Carolina, and we paid the price for that. Moving on, we have the Falcons at 2-2, at the 49ers 4-2. Every week the 49ers lose a good player. This week they lost Fred Warner for the season. But I still, I'm going to pick the 49ers. The 49ers, they continue to be a well-coached team with Robert Saleh on defense and Kyle Shanahan. And to me, Atlanta, they haven't really been all that impressive this season. To me, like, what's their best win? I think their best win this season was against the Commanders, against the Marcus Mariota-led Commanders. So, I'm not really all that impressed with the Falcons. Give me the 49ers to just continue to win. That's an at-home game for the 49ers. Then the last two games here, we have the Buccaneers at 5-1, at the Lions 4-2. These are two teams I don't like picking against this season. I think it's a toss-up game here. If this game was in Tampa, I'd probably pick the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But just because of the home field advantage, I like Detroit. And I do worry about the Detroit secondary. I think that Baker Mayfield could really exploit that. He's been playing at an MVP level, and he's even been playing at that level, without Mike Evans for a good part of the season, without Godwin for parts of the season. So I think you have to consider that. But I'm still going to take the Lions at home. I think their home field advantage is really good. Then we have the Texans at the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to take the underdog Texans here. I think these Monday night games get a little bit weird, and I like the Texans coming off a long bye. I think all the Texans have to do is contain Njigba in this game, and I think they really limit Seattle. The Texans have been good defensively all season long, and Seattle here is coming back from a long trip across the country in Jacksonville. So give me the Texans to win that game. I think the long bye really helps that team. So thank you guys for watching this week's picks. I'll be back next week, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.